Oh my god, it's the Batman!
Warning, this video contains spoilers. If you don't want to know the final score, look away now. There's also some references you won't get if you haven't watched the film, but that's your problem, not mine. Oh, so that's what that feels like.
No, I won't back down.
Hello there, viewers! Quite a summer we've had. Interesting how, thanks to a couple of victories in sports the government is about to cut funding to, that all of our problems seem to fade nicely into the background. But this summer hasn't only belonged to the meatheads who have declared themselves the greatest by virtue of running in a straight line quite fast. No. This summer, cinematically at least, has belonged to the hero. One hero, in particular, has become the victim of today's analysis. To be precise, the Batman. Now, as I'm sure anyone with a pulse will be aware, Christopher Nolan's third instalment of the Dark Knight trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises, exploded into cinemas during the month of July, and it blew the competition away. The competition at that point being Ice Age 3 and Magic Mike, but I digress. To the hardcore fans, it clearly meant the world to finally get a truly Dark Knight.
Did they kill him?
And credit where it's due, Christopher Nolan did not cop out. There was no return to the camp crime fighting of old. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But you know me better than that. This video is not going to be 3 hours of me jerking off over The Dark Knight Rises. I want to discuss the politics of Batman, and you hear that? That's the sound of literally every fanboy on the internet busting a nut over the keyboard in outrage.
OMG. You can't read into Batman like that. It's entertainment, for entertainment's sake. That's why it was created. It was on that basis alone. What the fudge do you know? You probably think Batman would lose in a fight to Superman.
And you think that gives you power over me? Please, allow me to explain what I'm going on about before you post any of those hateful comments. Let's start with the basics. There are two ways that Batman helps society, with his fist and with his wallet. In this respect, Christopher Nolan's films are no different from any other in the Batman franchise. Billionaire philanthropist by day, caped crusader by night, Bruce Wayne and his alter ego set out to try and change the face of Gotham for the better. But let's examine this more closely. How does an altruistic billionaire CEO fund such ventures? In order to give, first you must take. Or as Slavoj Žižek more repulsively puts it in his book, Violence.
Today's liberal capitalists give away with one hand what they first took with the other. This brings to mind a chocolate laxative available in the United States of America. It is publicized with the paradoxical injunction: do you have constipation? Eat more of this chocolate. In other words, eat the very thing that causes constipation in order to be cured of it.
In other words, let's consider Wayne Industries. In order to turn over a profit with which Bruce funds orphanages and builds tank cars, basic capitalist economics are necessary. It is common sense in the system of capitalism that in order to make profit, the employer must pay the employee less than their work and what they produce is worth. Not only that, but the workers produce far more than they and their bosses can actually consume, meaning the owners can get even richer by ceasing production, laying off workers, and gradually selling off the surplus produce. It is an exploitative relationship where the owners of industry, in this case Bruce Wayne, pay the workers far less wealth than their efforts generate, thus landing the capitalist with a fat profit margin. Obviously, Mr. Wayne spends a considerable chunk of this helping people, but the process which he draws these funds from causes unemployment, poverty, and desperation. It causes both deprivation and subsequently the crime which Batman seeks to prevent. Meanwhile, in both his philanthropic efforts and his vigilantism, Mr. Wayne creates a crutch to prop up this very system, whilst it would probably be more useful to solve such problems if people were to ask, why should the poor have to rely on the scraps kicked down to them on a billionaire's whim? People instead sanctify a charitable robber, more robbing bastard than Robin Hood, who takes a fortune from the poor in order to give a fraction back to them. And this, of course, is without mentioning Batman's third flimsy method of changing the world: inspiring others to act. It sounds noble and democratic even in the first film, but over the course of the other two we see Bruce never really wanted to empower ordinary people to make their world better. He just wanted policing with teeth.
In order to put the filth of Gotham behind bars, we need a few more hotheads in my department. You there, officer. What's your name?
Officer Heads, Backs and Gaze, sir.
That's an interesting name. Why do you want to join the force?
My truncheon hungers.
I don't think that's a standard issue. Okay, give this one a truncheon and a gun. Put him out on the streets. But for God's sake, keep him out of the office. He's a total whack job.
That leads to the creation of an unaccountable police state, which it is revealed has jailed thousands of criminals of all shapes and sizes, without parole. So to sum it up, the Bruce Waynes of this world are both figures to conserve and to sanctify a system that causes more poverty than charity can solve. Batman is tough on crime, but not on the causes of crime.
No, I'm not having that. Christopher Nolan would never intentionally load his films with all of this. He makes films for entertainment purposes, pure and fudging simple.
Look, I'm not done yet. Let me finish, and when you understand, then I will allow you to die. Not only is it extremely insulting to a director like Chris Nolan, who's helped to pioneer the art house blockbuster, to suggest that his films only work on a simple reptilian-brained sex plus violence equals entertainment basis, as his films have always encompassed far more complex ideas than that. However, it is also possible for ideas and concepts to be included in a film without as much as a second thought. In order to explain this, however, I need to enlist the help of Italian Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci.
Buongiorno, Signor Brindelli.
More Italian.
Mamma mia, talk about the dialectics. This is racist. So in the capitalist society, the ruling class maintain dominance through two ways. Through domination and through consent. Domination is through the institutions such as the police, the legal system. In the army, it is the way the ruling class physically maintains their hold over society. Consent, however. Consent is the way in which they normalize their ideas so that people go about their lives not realizing they are dominated most of the time. We call this process hegemony. So furthermore, the ideas of this dominant class, the so-called dominant ideology, are spread through all of our institutions of culture, through our schools, through the press, and in this case, through films. This is because this class of people, this ruling class, looking to expand their money-making capacity, buy or invest in society's means of communication. These means of communication subsequently put forth a particular worldview, which as it is broadly unchallenged in times of low levels of struggle, how do you say, become common sense? Now, this is not to suggest some mad conspiracy where all some sinister scheming global boardroom are purposely manipulating us. In fact, most of the owners of communication are behaving in a way that they too have been conditioned by their economic system. We have already mentioned how you must behave in a certain way to become a successful capitalist. Exploitation is essential. So by the time an individual might come to, say, a newspaper, he or she has already had to describe to certain methods or an idea is considered the norm. It is therefore more than likely that the paper will continue to espouse the very views as common sense, because the capitalist assumes them to be true too. They put these ideas forth as fact, part of the natural order of things, and so can spread such theories to the very people that ideology exploits.
Thanks very much, Tony.
Ah, the pets of the murder!
Ah, the lovable Italians. So basically, because of the way capitalist economics enable the monopolisation of communication to put forth certain ideas, Batman is a product of the property-owning class, whether he is purely meant as harmless entertainment or not.
War has started.
But just to get an extra bit of perspective here, let's consider another hero film from the summer of 2012. The Avengers is another franchise produced predominantly for entertainment, and I've encountered the same argument that as such, it has no political content. Yet, it features a freedom-hating villain who attempts to destroy everything Western society stands for. The antidote for this man is a guy who dresses in a star-spangled banner because, apparently, in times like these, people need something old-fashioned, as well as a collection of quarrelling heroes who have to put aside their differences to defeat evil with a capital E. Their boss never makes his motives entirely clear, but just when they stand on the verge of questioning what they're being asked to do, they're hit by a massive attack of evil. This galvanises them into uniting to kick the enemy all the way back to the other dimension. Now, are you going to suggest that the themes in this film, after a decade or more of fear-mongering and calls for national unity in order to face some unspeakable anti-Western bogeyman during the post-9/11 era, is just a coincidence?
You're a detective now. You're not allowed to believe in coincidence anymore.
I'm not saying that The Dark Knight Rises contains an overt political message, but what it does hold within its very genetic makeup is the assumptions, ideas and fears of the dominant class in society. Just as every single story ever told reflected the values and cultures of the society in which it was produced. Ideas that just occur to a film's creators as common sense are in their very essence political, and they affect the way that any sort of story pans out, who the heroes and villains are, who the winners and losers are, and what morals can be taken from that conclusion. But that's true of all Batman films, which is why I don't necessarily see the point in simply slating the film for what some people have described as a rightward lurch. That would be shoddy critiquing. Batman has always been, to some degree, right-wing. What's interesting here is not that the fears of the dominant class are reflected, but rather how they are reflected. Previous to Nolan's trilogy, villains were usually characterised by petty lusts for revenge or the desire for simple acts of theft. Now, though, we see villains who aren't just out to get their own back. They're looking to destroy everything that those in power currently stand for and to dismantle the system that they rely on. Property owners, big business, the political class have all been perpetually on trial since the beginning of the economic crisis. And this year, even the Muppets have been putting the wealthy on trial, featuring a billionaire oil tycoon as their villain of choice. Bearing this in mind, the character of Bane is of particular importance. He represents the backlash at this anti-corporate sentiment,
He uses the rhetoric of the 99%, the dispossessed, the downtrodden. He even overthrows his paymaster before taking leadership of a revolution. He condemns corporate greed and government corruption. He calls for a radical redistribution of power from the elites to the people, and he even establishes people's courts to try the decadent and the corrupt.
Elizabeth, Regina, you have been found guilty of decadence and crimes against the people. You have an option of death or cake.
I will have the cake!
Very well. Bring out the cake of death.
Get the cake away from me! No!
And perhaps most pointedly, Bane leads an armed assault against the Gotham Stock Exchange. This scene is a beautiful embodiment of the fears of the wealthy and powerful in 2012. It begins by focusing in on various varieties of worker in the building. Suddenly, the previously safe, dull-looking employees spring into life as a delivery boy reveals himself to be Bane. He leads Mr. Mop & Co. into the main building and holds the place up, provoking an intriguing exchange with one marketer.
This is just a stock exchange. There's nothing to steal here.
Then why are you people here? This moment draws an obvious parallel with the genuine fury of ordinary people suffering under austerity, whilst bankers and the thieves in the financial district plunder everything that we relied on to survive. Healthcare, education, employment rights have all come under attack thanks to the economic system and its perpetrators. Everything that ever gave our lives a degree of safety, security, a degree of dignity, so that we didn't have to rely on the whims of some benevolent Bruce Wayne to survive. But let's get something clear. Bane isn't a revolutionary. He lies to the good people of Gotham and leads a mob. The usual right-wing account of history's movements is one powerful man corrupting genuinely well-meaning people, leading them to do terrible things. Those who are led astray by Bane's faux Lenin are embodied predominantly by Catwoman.
The proletariat have nothing to lose but the chains. They have the world to win. Workers of the world unite.
So, is this all part of the foreplay or what?
She expresses revolutionary sentiments, albeit in an overtly sexually suggestive manner, but in the end, she becomes disillusioned with the post-revolutionary Gotham, which becomes an icy Soviet nightmare in less than a month.
Legitimate desires of economic or systemic change are thus presented as the ideals of the naive, or as rhetoric of people who genuinely desire the downfall and destruction of society. What intrigues me then is that The Dark Knight Rises has reflected exactly what the ruling class fear. Capitalist economics are regarded by them as common sense, and without them, they assume that the globe would actually grind to a halt on its axis, and the sky would come tumbling down.
Of course, that's a complete misrepresentation of what the global struggle for social change really is. It stands for absolute democratic control to be won by the people for the first time in history. It stands for justice, for safety from persecution, oppression and hunger, for dignity from cradle to grave. Worldwide, the people with access to those things are a vast minority compared to the mass ranks of the exploited.
You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
The minority of powerful exploiters are realising that they are outnumbered and out of favour. And that's what I find most interesting about this film. I'm not going to condemn The Dark Knight or Batman because of its internal ideology, any more than I could condemn someone for catching a common cold. This most recent incarnation of Batman shows the wealthy and the powerful quaking in their boots at the prospect of a collective uprising against their corrupt and undemocratic practices in the name of creating a new world. The character who opposes their corruption might be the villain here, but that's nothing new, either in Batman or in Hollywood.
What is new is the tacit admission that the people in power are scared that change is finally on the horizon. An end to their way of life is on the cards. The upheaval of their world is written on the wall. Frankly, I think we should take great confidence in the fact that The Dark Knight Rises shows us those in control of society are absolutely bricking it at the prospect of increasingly united actions against them. Because after all these years of economic desolation, institutional scandals, political corruption, brutality, theft and murder, so they bloody should be.
You done yet?
Yeah, that's the end.
Great. Now come with me.
I'm not getting in your car.
It's not a car. Now get on the handlebars.
Because he's the hero that YouTube deserves. But not the one it needs right now. So we'll hunt him. Because he can take it. Because he's not our hero. He's a silent guardian. A watchful protector. A dark knight.